Recently, Kaylin came down from her bedroom carrying this box that we had made a few years ago. It's painted with a large K on top. And as she sat down, she opened the box and proceeded to pull out these small items, trinkets, notes, pictures. These items each represented important people who have been a part of her life over the years. Me, Lindsay, Parker were all represented in the box. Her grandma and grandpa, her nana and papa, all represented in the box. Now, there were more people represented, but the point is that Kaylin is collecting and holding on to these items that play an important symbolic role for her. They represent the web of loving relationships that have helped Kaylin carve out a sense of space in the world, a sense of identity. Now, there are real people and experience behind each symbol in her box, and the ongoing interactions that she has with each person represented there continues to define. It adds contour and definition and depth to the meaning of the symbols in her box. And while the symbols mean something to her, they will never replace the real people they represent. They'll never replace presence. Friends, we've been drilling down into the theme of temple as it comes to us in the scriptures. And the first 2 weeks, we took a look at the creation narratives of Genesis 1 and 2. When read in the ancient Near Eastern context, the language and structure of the 7 days of creation in Genesis 1 would have popped off the page as the language of temple building. It was as if God was declaring to anyone that would listen back then, Baal can have his bricks and mortar. Me? Well, the entire cosmos is my temple. And then the detail in Genesis 2 reveal that all of life is the proper context for the worship of God. Humanity has been placed here to abad and shamar, to work the earth and take care of it. The use of these words serve as a foreshadowing of the tasks that priests undertook to serve and guard in the temple. We see that daily life is the proper context for the activities of the temple to play out. Seeing God's activity, His presence all around. Seeing His revelation, hearing God's truth. And the idea of living in the atonement, living out restored relationship in shalom. All of life is the proper context for this. Now, for those familiar with the beginning of the Bible, we know that the story doesn't remain in the idyllic garden temple. In Genesis 3, there's a turning in the narrative, and the central characters, Adam and Eve, disobey and are pictured as rebelling against the Creator. In Genesis 3, 23 and 24, it reads, "So the Lord God banished them from the Garden of Eden, and He sent Adam out to cultivate the ground from which he had been made. And after sending them out, the Lord God stationed mighty cherubim to the east of the Garden of Eden, and He placed a flaming sword that flashed back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life." In the wake of Adam and Eve's rebellion, people became blind and deaf. Brokenness and separation flooded the earth. Humanity has been dramatically impacted by, as a result of this. In general, we have our eyes closed to the presence of God all around us. We have our ears shut to God's truth as it comes to us. And we continue to stumble into patterns of living that break shalom. We continue to stumble into patterns of living that really need God's work in them. We need atonement. We need God to enact shalom once again. And into this broken and separated world, God leaned in. He approached Abraham and made a covenant with him. He would be their God and they would be his people. Through them, the entire world would be blessed. He called them holy. He set them apart and gave them a series of laws and commands that ensured they would be different from everyone else around. And then to a blind, deaf, and dumb people, God provided a visible reminder, the tabernacle. Moses was instructed at Mount Sinai to construct and transport the tabernacle with the Israelites on their journey through the wilderness until they came to the promised land. The tabernacle had three main sections: the outer court, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. The items that were a part of each section carried great significance. The main structure of the tabernacle was made out of tapestry curtains decorated with cherubim. The interior was divided into two rooms, the holy place and the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. The outer room, or holy place, contained the table on which the bread of the presence was placed, the altar of incense, and the 7-branched menorah. The inner room, or the Holy of Holies, was thought to be the actual dwelling place of the God of Israel, who sat invisibly enthroned above a solid slab of gold that rested on the Ark of the Covenant, and had a cherub at each end. This ark was a gold-covered wooden box containing a jar of manna, Aaron's staff, and the tablets of the 10 Commandments. As they wandered day by day, the Israelites would set up the tabernacle each time they made camp, and they always set it up facing east. It was movable and temporary. It wasn't fixed to any one location, but it traveled with them. This meant that the presence of God was understood as being with his people wherever they went. Although they were traveling through a strange wilderness, they had the opportunity each and every time they set up camp in a new location to have a reminder that God's got them, that they were not wandering alone. And I'm sure that this served as a source of comfort and peace for them during the long days of wandering. Now, coming out of Genesis 1 and 2, and the mind-blowing depiction that the entire cosmos, all creation, serves as God's actual temple, this view of God being contained in a tent in the midst of the Israelite camp as they wandered through the desert seems like a bit of a step down. Now, in almost every imaginable way, this is God accommodating the limitations of a broken people. He was providing identification with them. Think about it. They were dwelling in tents. So was he. The presence of God remained with the people in a way that reflected complete sympathy with them, while they were without roots, wandering from place to place. God remained with them. However, once they arrived in the promised land and they put down roots and they established homes, then so did the symbol of God's presence. The tent of the tabernacle was replaced by the bricks and mortar of the temple in Jerusalem. A major feature of the tabernacle was the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was a box 3 feet long, 2 feet high, and 2 feet wide. It was made from acacia wood, which made it durable and non-perishable, and then it was overlaid with gold. Now, the Ark was not just a chest, but it served as a visible throne for the Israelites. So not only did they consider the tabernacle as a sign of God's presence in their midst, but they rested in knowing that God was leading them as their king. They weren't just wandering without a leader. God was there on the throne. In speaking about the tabernacle, Hebrews 9:4 says, "In that room were a gold incense altar and a wooden chest called the Ark of the Covenant, which was covered with gold on all sides. Inside the ark were a gold jar containing manna, Aaron's staff that sprouted leaves, and the stone tablets of the covenant." As a symbol of God's kingly presence in their midst, the ark brought meaning to the life and faith of the Israelites. Think about the items that were housed in the ark. Manna, literally food from heaven that the Israelites ate for nourishment as they wandered through the desert. Aaron's staff that had sprouted leaves. Now, the book of Exodus includes details of how Aaron's staff played a significant role as God went about rescuing the Israelites from oppression in Egypt. It was Aaron's staff that was turned into a snake in Pharaoh's court. And when the Egyptian magicians also turned their staffs into snakes, it was Aaron's rod that was turned into a snake that ate them up. It was Aaron's staff that God used to turn the water of Egypt into blood. And it was Aaron's staff that summoned the plagues of the frogs and the gnats. And then after Moses and Aaron had led the Israelites out of captivity, God set Aaron and his sons apart as priests. The rest of the Levites were then to minister to the Lord in the tabernacle. They were to offer sacrifices and hear from God for the good of the whole nation. They were to minister his presence. They were to offer sacrifices for atonement. And they were to hear from God as he revealed his purposes for the Israelites. You see those temple activities playing out. The presence of the staff in the ark reminded the Israelites that God was a warrior who would fight on their behalf. And then there was those stone tablets of the covenant. The stone tablets had the 10 Commandments written on them, a representation of the law. Their presence in the ark served as a reminder of Israelite identity as the people of God, the covenant people of God. We know that wandering in the desert got tiring for them. When times got tough, they could look at the ark, knowing the stone tablets were there, and remember that they were God's special people. Through all this, God was forming a people after his own heart. He was teaching them to be holy and set apart. He was teaching them to be fully human as he had created them to be. In coming into the promised land, the Israelites would have been basking in the fulfillment of some of what God had promised to Abraham. They were now settled in their own land. With the construction of the temple, the place of God's presence, revelation, and atonement also became rooted and connected to the very geography of covenant faithfulness and fulfillment. As they went about their daily lives, they could look to the temple as an ongoing reminder of who they were, God's chosen people. The tabernacle and then the temple after it was a gift to the Israelites as a means to experience God. His presence was understood as residing there. They could hear the truth of God's revelation as it was seen and understood as coming from there. And they could live in relational peace and wholeness as they offered sacrifices and atonement was made there in the temple. Coming on the heels of the idyllic garden experience and the entire cosmos as serving as a temple. And then Adam and Eve being invited into Abad and Shamar as representative of humanity to work the earth and take care of it. Well, the accommodation of the tabernacle and then the temple and its specific people serving as priests would seem like a pretty big shift. But friends, when we understand that this shift is made coming out of a heart of love and grace, of entering into their experience in a way that a broken and dejected people could grasp, well, that's pretty great. And when we understand this shift coming in a way that visually inspired them and kept them on track during their desert wandering. Well, that's amazing. When we understand that the shift is coming in a way that brought meaning and identity to their life in the promised land, well, that's fantastic. We have a picture of a God who is willing to accommodate a broken and fallen humanity. There's something truly beautiful about that. We're going to see as the story progresses that it's Jesus that actually sits at the center of this story. God incarnate, who would serve as the ultimate accommodation for broken and fallen humanity. Friends, may we see the tabernacle and temple in the Old Testament as a reminder that the God we pursue is the one who has always been about meeting us where we are, meeting us in the very midst of our brokenness, and then leading us out from there.